The winter wind howled across the frozen river, carrying the acrid bite of smoke from the smoldering ruins of what had once been Elena Vasquez's lifeline. Her family's old mill, perched on the edge of the Columbia River Gorge, had stood for generations, a weathered warehouse stacked high with cordwood, preserved furs, and canned goods for the harsh Oregon winters. But now, flames had licked through the timbers like vengeful tongues, reducing her stockpile to ash under a moonless sky. Elena crouched behind a rusted barrel, her breath fogging in the chill, watching the distant glow pulse against the water's dark surface. She'd always known the risks of living on the fringes of Portland's underbelly. Her father had run a small logging operation, legitimate on paper, but whispers linked it to the black market for rare hardwoods smuggled from the Cascades. Elena had taken over after his heart gave out 2 winters ago, scraping by with side deals that kept the lights on. But this fire wasn't an accident. Arsonists had torched it just after midnight, their silhouettes vanishing into the fog-shrouded docks downstream. And everyone in the gorge knew who pulled strings like that. Victor Russo, the iron-fisted boss of the Russo Syndicate, whose grip on the river's shipping lanes was as unyielding as the basalt cliffs. Elena's hands trembled as she clutched her father's old hunting rifle, the stock worn smooth from years of use. She wasn't one for revenge. Survival had taught her caution. But with the mill gone, her crew, loyal hands who'd followed her father, faced eviction from their shacks come spring thaw. The bank wouldn't wait for insurance claims, and the syndicate's loan sharks were circling like crows. As the last embers hissed into the river, a low rumble echoed from the upstream dam. The Spillway gates, her one remaining card. The mill's water rights included access to that ancient structure, a relic from the WPA days, meant to manage floodwaters. Open it wrong, and the river would swell, swallowing lowlands whole, including the sprawling compound where Victor Russo held court. By dawn, Elena stood at the Spillway's control house, the air thick with the metallic tang of rust and damp concrete. Her boots crunched on frost-covered gravel as she pried open the rusted panel, revealing the manual levers coated in decades of grime. The dam's operators were syndicate men, rotated in shifts to ensure no one tampered with the flow that fed Russo's private docks. But Elena knew the weak points. Her father had mapped them during lean years, when he'd bartered water shares for protection. With a deep breath, she engaged the secondary gate, the one reserved for emergencies, releasing a controlled surge that would build over hours, not minutes. Enough to flood the compound's basements and warehouses without alerting upstream sensors too soon. As the water began to roar below, frothing white against the rocks, Elena slipped away into the pine thickets, her heart pounding. She needed proof this wasn't just desperation. A burner phone in her pocket held a grainy photo from a dockside camera, snapped by a trusted hand before the fire. It showed 2 men in dark coats unloading crates from a Russo barge, crates marked with her mill's insignia, stolen lumber rerouted for the boss's luxury exports. Russo hadn't just burned her out. He'd been bleeding her dry for months, using her operation as a front. If the flood worked, it'd buy her time to expose him, maybe even rally the other Riverside families against his monopoly. But as she hiked back toward her truck, hidden in a copse of firs, the first sign of trouble hummed in the air, the distant thrum of engines. Black SUVs crested the ridge, their tires churning mud, headlights slicing through the morning mist like accusations. Elena dove behind a fallen log, the rifle at her side, as the lead vehicle slowed. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair and a face carved from granite. Victor Russo himself, flanked by 2 guards in tailored suits, their hands hovering near concealed holsters. He scanned the tree line, his breath visible in the cold, then barked into a radio. "Fan out! Someone's messing with my river." Elena's pulse raced. How had he known so fast? The Spillway's alarms should have been silent for another hour. One of the guards fiddled with a tablet, pulling up a schematic, likely hacked from the dam's outdated system. Russo's eyes narrowed, locking on the control house in the distance. This isn't some flood. It's sabotage. Find the bitch who runs that mill. Vasquez, bring her to me. She waited, muscles coiled, until the convoy rumbled past, heading toward the rising water. Russo's compound lay downstream, a fortress of steel gates and floodlit warehouses masquerading as a logistics hub. If the surge hit right, it'd swamp his underground vaults, cash, ledgers, smuggled goods worth millions. But victory tasted bitter. Russo's reach was long, and retaliation swift. As she crept to her truck, a faint beep from the burner phone made her freeze. A new message, coordinates for a safe house, and a single line. He's coming for you. But I can help. Meet me at the old boathouse. A. Who was A? A rival. A turncoat in Russo's ranks. The water's roar grew louder behind her, a symphony of impending chaos. But the real flood was the one rushing toward her life. Elena gunned the engine, tires spinning on wet leaves, wondering if opening the gates had saved her, or sealed her fate. The old boathouse squatted at the river's elbow, where the Columbia's current twisted like a serpent through overhanging alders. Elena killed the truck's engine a quarter-mile out, the gravel crunching under her tires like brittle bones. Mist clung to the water's edge, carrying the sharp scent of wet earth and decaying leaves, mingling with the faint, oily tang of motor fuel from abandoned slips. She slung the rifle over her shoulder, its weight a cold comfort against the chill seeping through her wool jacket. The burner phone buzzed once in her pocket, confirmation of the coordinates, no more words. Trusting a ghost in Russo's shadow was madness, but with the Spillway's roar echoing in her ears like distant thunder, she had few choices. She moved low through the underbrush, boots sinking into mud that sucked at her heels. The boathouse's weathered planks loomed ahead, its roof sagging under moss and years of neglect. A single sodium lamp flickered on the dock, casting elongated shadows that danced with the lapping waves. Elena paused at the tree line, scanning for tells. No tire tracks beyond the overgrown path, no glint of binoculars from the opposite bank. But her skin prickled. Russo's men were thorough, their surveillance a web of dash cams, license plate readers and informants in every riverside bar. If A was bait, this was the perfect trap, isolated, no witnesses. Pushing open the creaky door, Elena stepped into the dim interior. The air hung heavy with mildew and the musty odor of old ropes coiled in corners. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the walls, illuminating dust motes swirling like secrets. A figure waited in the gloom, silhouetted against a grimy window overlooking the river. Not one of Russo's bruisers, this was a woman, mid-30s, with sharp features and dark hair pulled into a tight bun. She wore a nondescript parka over jeans, but the way she held a compact pistol at her side screamed professional. No holster bulge. She'd palmed it from a pocket. "You're Vasquez," the woman said, her voice low and edged with a faint East Coast clip. She didn't lower the gun, but her eyes flicked to the rifle. "Smart, coming armed, but if you're here to shoot, make it quick. Russo's convoy is already downstream, assessing the flood." Elena kept her distance, finger hovering near the trigger guard. "Who the hell are you, and why text me like some spook?" The woman holstered the pistol with a fluid motion, pulling a laminated ID from her pocket. Fake, probably, but it bore a Port Authority badge. "Name's Alex. I run logistics for the docks, or what's left after Russo squeezes us dry. Saw your mill go up last night from my perch. Those weren't random torches, they used his signature mix, kerosene laced with diesel, slow burn to cover tracks. I got a tip from a guard rotation log. Your crates were diverted 2 weeks back, relabeled for Russo's Vancouver shipments. Hardwoods to high-end furniture flips. He's been using your operation as a ghost supplier." Elena's jaw tightened. The photo on her burner matched. Same crates, same barge. But logs? That meant access to internal records, the kind buried in encrypted drives or hidden ledgers. "Why help me? If you're Port Authority, call the feds. Let them drown his ass in audits. Alex snorted, a bitter sound that echoed off the rafters. Feds? Russo owns half the Bureau's local payroll, and I'm not official. Not anymore. My brother's one of his drivers. Saw too much, talked too loud. Now he's on vacation in a safe house that might as well be a cage. The Spillway was a good play. His compound's pumps are jury-rigged for low flow. By noon, it'll swamp the sublevels. Cash drops, smuggled pharma, falsified manifests. But it'll draw heat. Rivals like the Chen crew upstream, they'll smell blood and move in. Elena leaned against a splintered beam, the wood rough under her palm. The river's murmur outside swelled, a reminder of the chaos she'd unleashed. Gratitude warred with suspicion. Alex's story fit, but turncoats had layers. Proof. Show me something real, or I'm gone. Alex pulled a slim tablet from her pack, tapping the screen to life. It glowed with a scanned document. A shipping manifest, dated last month, listing Elena's lumber as salvage, routed to Russo Enterprises. Subtle discrepancies jumped out. Vehicle plates from a ghost fleet, guard rotations overlapping her mill's quiet nights. Hacked from a shared drive. Their IT guy's sloppy, uses the same password for the damn controls. That's how Russo knew about the Spillway so fast. I tripped a silent alert rerouting to his phone. The pieces clicked, the quick response, the schematic on the guard's tablet. Human error, not magic. Russo's empire thrived on it, loyalists cutting corners for fat envelopes. But this intel was leverage, a thread to pull for exposure. Elena's mind raced. With this, she could rally the other mill owners, force a sit-down or tip off a clean cop. Yet autonomy clashed with the pull of alliance. Alex's eyes held a haunted gleam, loyalty to family twisting into vengeance. A low rumble vibrated the floorboards. Engines, closing in from the access road. Alex's head snapped up. That's them. Russo's cleanup crew. We move now, or we're both fish food. Elena nodded, slinging the pack with the tablet inside. They slipped out the back, into the thicket, as black sedans prowled the dock. One guard stepped out, radio crackling. Boss says alive if possible. She's got the keys to the river. Huddled in the ferns, Elena whispered. Where to? Your brother's safe house? Alex shook her head, eyes on the river's rising churn. Too hot. There's a tunnel under the old rail bridge, smuggler's route. But if Chen's watching, it'll be a gauntlet. The first shots cracked the air, splintering wood from the boathouse. Elena's heart hammered as they bolted, the flood's roar masking their steps. Trust forged in flight, but shadows lengthened behind. Who had sold Alex out, and what price would the river exact next? The underbrush clawed at Elena's legs like desperate fingers as she and Alex plunged deeper into the thicket, the river's relentless growl masking the snap of twigs underfoot. Mud sucked at their boots, releasing the earthy reek of soaked loam and pine sap, while the first fat raindrops of an incoming storm pattered on the canopy overhead. Bullets whined past, thudding into tree trunks with sharp cracks that echoed like accusations. Elena's rifle bounced against her back, a leaden reminder of the fight she wasn't ready for. Not yet. Alex led the way, her movements precise, glancing back only once to hiss, "Keep low. The bridge is half a mile. Rail lines overgrown, but it covers us." Elena's breath came in ragged bursts, the cold air burning her lungs. Trusting this stranger felt like handing over the keys to the Spillway all over again, a gamble on human frailty in a world where loyalty was just another commodity Russo traded. But the manifest on the tablet burned in her pack like contraband gold. It wasn't just her mill's ruin anymore. It tied Russo to falsified exports, skirting federal tariffs on luxury imports, hardwoods flipped to Vancouver elites, pharma precursors hidden in the holds. If Alex was legit, this could unravel his river stranglehold. If not, Elena was running straight into the jaws. They broke from the trees onto a cracked asphalt path. the old rail bridge looming ahead like a rusted skeleton arched over the swelling Columbia. Its iron girders creaked in the wind, sodium lights from a distant maintenance shed, casting erratic pools of yellow on the water below. The tunnel mouth gaped black and uninviting, a concrete maw framed by graffiti-scarred walls and the faint drip of groundwater. Alex vaulted a chain-link fence first, landing with a grunt, then held it for Elena. Smugglers carved this out decades ago. Pre-Russo, when the unions ran the docks. It's got side shafts, but watch for rats, and water levels, your floods pushing everything upstream. Elena squeezed through, the wire scraping her jacket, and they darted into the tunnel's throat. Darkness swallowed them whole, the air turning clammy and thick with the mineral tang of moldering stone and stagnant puddles. Their footsteps echoed off the curved walls, a hollow rhythm that amplified every rustle. Their own? Or something worse? Alex flicked on a penlight from her pocket, its beam slicing narrow paths through the gloom, revealing rusted tracks choked with debris. Discarded crates, oil drums, the skeletal remains of an old handcar. The river's pressure hummed through the walls, a low vibration that set Elena's teeth on edge. Outside, engines growled closer, tires churning gravel, Russo's men fanning out, radios crackling with coordinates pulled from dash cams or thermal scopes mounted on those SUVs. "Talk," Elena demanded, her voice a whisper that bounced back too loud. She kept pace, eyes darting to the shadows. "Your brother's in a safe house. Why not bust him out? Why drag me into this?" Alex's light wavered, catching the glint of moisture on her face. Sweat or rain? "His name's Marco. Drove for Russo 3 years, hauling legit cargo, engines, steel. But last haul was different, crates from the mill district, marked for your supplier. He overheard the boss on a burner. Vasquez is getting too nosy. Torch it clean. Marco fed me the logs before they locked him down. Safe house is a penthouse in the city, guarded 24/7. Cameras on every door, rotation every 4 hours. I tried once, got a black eye and a warning shot for my trouble. Elena's mind reeled, piecing the puzzle. The fire's timing, right after her last shipment, fit. Russo hadn't just stolen. He'd silenced a loose end. But Marco's intel explained the Spillway hack too. Shared drives meant shared vulnerabilities, passwords recycled across ops. Human error, the syndicate's Achilles heel. And the Chen crew? You mentioned rivals. If the flood hits Russo's vaults, they'll pounce. Why not let them? Alex slowed at a junction where the tunnel forked into a narrower service shaft, its entrance barred by a sagging grate. She wedged it open with a crowbar from her pack, the metal screeching like a betrayed informant. Chens control the upstream locks, fish imports, real estate flips. But they're no better. Cutthroat on debts, worse on territory. Russo's flood buys us a window, but if they move in, the river turns war zone. Docks black out, manifests vanish, and independents like you get caught in the crossfire. She paused, shining the light on Elena's face. I need your water rights. Legal claim to the Spillway. It's leverage for a truce or a tip to the right DA. But Russo knows you're the key. That's why he's hunting. The grate clanged shut behind them, muffling the outside world, but Elena's pulse thrummed with the push-pull of it all. Autonomy screamed to cut and run, expose Russo solo with what she had. Yet Alex's haunted eyes mirrored her own loss. The mill, the crew, a legacy reduced to ashes. Loyalty versus fear. The code of survival demanded allies, even risky ones. As they pressed on, the shaft narrowed, forcing single file, the walls brushing their shoulders. Water trickled from cracks overhead, cold rivulets snaking down Elena's neck, carrying the faint, acrid whiff of upstream diesel. Russo's barges, perhaps, already rerouting. A sudden crackle echoed from behind. Static, then voices, tinny through the grate. Thermals picking up 2 signatures heading tunnel side. Boss wants confirmation. Vasquez alive. Alex killed the light, plunging them into inky black. Elena's hand found the rifle's stock, breath shallow. The river's hum swelled, vibrating the concrete as footsteps scraped closer from the main tunnel. Had a guard slipped the grate? Or worse, a tail Alex hadn't shaken? In the darkness, Elena whispered, "If this is a setup, it's not." Alex shot back, her voice steel. "But if they breach, we split the shaft. Emergency exit to the riverbank. You swim. I draw fire." Tension coiled like the current outside, the air growing heavier with the storm's approach. Rain hammered the bridge above, a staccato drum that could cover an advance or drown a scream. Elena strained to listen, the shadows alive with tells, a boot scuff, a radio beep. Then, a new sound, low, mechanical, from deeper in the fork ahead. Not footsteps, a generator's whine, faint but rising, like a hidden door powering up. Who had beat them there? The Chens, staking a claim. Or Russo's infiltrators waiting in the dark. As the whine built to a rumble, Elena's grip tightened. The tunnel's secrets were unraveling, but so was the fragile thread between them. Whoever lurked ahead held the next floodgate. If you're enjoying this story so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The rumble from deeper in the service shaft grew insistent, a mechanical growl that vibrated through the damp concrete like the river's own pulse quickening. Elena pressed against the slick wall, her free hand steadying the rifle's barrel, while Alex crouched low, her breath a measured hiss in the suffocating dark. Rain pounded the bridge overhead, a relentless tattoo that blurred the edges of sound. Footsteps from behind, or just the storm's fury. The air thickened with the ozone tang of wet stone and distant exhaust, seeping from cracks where the tunnel met the outside world. Elena's mind raced. If Russo's men had flanked them, this narrow vein was a coffin. But the generator's whine suggested something else. Power, hidden and waiting, like the sublevels of Russo's compound now churning under her flood. "Stay put," Alex murmured, her voice a thread in the black. She eased forward, fingers brushing Elena's arm in a fleeting anchor. Trust, tentative as the first crack in ice. Elena nodded into the void, though unseen, her pulse hammering against the cold metal of the rifle. Autonomy clashed with the pull of this alliance. Alex's story wove too neatly into her own losses, but betrayal lingered in every shadow, a ghost of her father's warnings about Riverside deals gone sour. The manifest was real, its digital ink damning Russo's logistics. Plates from a fleet registered to shell companies, rotations timed to her mill's unguarded hours. Yet proof meant exposure, and in the syndicate's web, witnesses washed up bloated in the shallows. Alex's penlight flickered on for a split second, a blade of white revealing a rusted panel ahead. Ventilation grate, half pried from its frame, wires dangling like exposed nerves. The generator's source, a portable unit tucked behind, its fuel tank humming with fresh diesel, the kind Russo's crews siphoned from dockside pumps. "Not ours," Alex whispered, killing the light. "Smuggler's cache, but recent. Someone's been using this route. Chens, maybe, scouting the flood chaos." Elena's stomach nodded. Rivals didn't scout. They struck. The Chen syndicate upstream peddled influence through lockmasters and real estate shells, their barges laden with fish that smelled more of contraband silk and tech knockoffs. If they'd infiltrated the tunnel, Elena's Spillway gambit had lit a fuse. Russo weakened, territory ripe for the taking. But independents like her? Collateral, swept under in the turf war. A faint scrape echoed from the panel, metal on metal, followed by a muffled voice. Accented English, clipped and urgent. "Boss, water's rising fast. Pumps failing. Manifest secure, but the ledger's wet. Need extraction now." Not Russo's gravelly timber. This was Chen muscle, coordinating in the dark. Elena's breath caught. The ledger. If it held cross-referenced shipments, it could link Russo's thefts to broader rackets. Her lumber-feeding Vancouver black markets. Pharma routes overlapping Chen imports. Clues buried in ink and numbers. The kind that toppled empires if leaked to a DA with backbone. But voices multiplied behind them now. Boots echoing from the main tunnel. Radios buzzing with static-laced orders. Tunnel clear. Vasquez signal fading. Thermal glitch from the rain. Alex grabbed Elena's sleeve, pulling her toward the panel. Through here. Side shaft drops to the bank, faster than swimming. They squeezed past the grate, the jagged edges snagging fabric, the air shifting to a briny chill laced with river mud. The space narrowed to a crawl, knees scraping gravel embedded in the floor. The generator's heat a brief furnace at their backs. Elena's pack thudded against the low ceiling, the tablet inside a fragile talisman. Human conflicts surged. Her code demanded prudence, exposing Russo through channels, not this frantic burrow. Yet Alex's vendetta mirrored her own. Family caged, legacy torched, forging a bond amid the peril. Possessiveness and shared secrets pulling against her independence. A beam of light pierced the shaft behind them, sweeping wild as Russo's men breached the grate. "Got movement! 2 heat blooms! Flush 'em!" Shots rang out, ricocheting off the walls with deafening cracks, sparks flaring like fireflies in hell. Elena stifled a curse, crawling faster, the rifle dragging awkwardly. Alex led, her form a shadow ahead, whispering coordinates from memory. 20 yards, then left. Emergency hatch. WPA era. Blows to the tree line. The shaft trembled, the flood's pressure building through the earth, water seeping in thin streams that soaked Elena's jeans, carrying the faint rot of submerged debris. Outside, the storm howled, wind whipping the Columbia into whitecaps that slapped against the bank like accusations. They reached the hatch, a heavy iron lid, rusted but unbolted, likely prepped by whoever owned the generator. Alex heaved it open with a groan, daylight exploding in, rain lashed and gray. They tumbled out onto a muddy embankment, hidden by overhanging ferns, the river roaring mere feet away, swollen and furious from the spillway's release. Elena rolled to her knees, rifle up, scanning the opposite bank. No boats, but a distant glint. Binoculars? Surveillance, Chen or Russo, eyes on the chaos. Alex crouched beside her, wiping mud from her face, eyes fierce. That ledger. They mentioned it. If it's in the vaults, the flood's got it now, but backups exist. My brother's seen the master file. Cloud synced to a server in the penthouse. We get Marco out. We get it all. Elena's heart twisted. Loyalty versus the fear gnawing her gut. The penthouse. High-rise fortress downtown. Glass walls masking steel security. Guards rotating like clockwork. Infiltration meant crossing lines, from river rat to syndicate player. Her ethics fraying against the need for justice. But as engines revved from the tunnel mouth, SUVs cresting the bank, tires spinning in the slick, retreat wasn't an option. Your play, Elena said, voice steady despite the tremor. But we do it smart, no suicides. They slipped into the tree line, the river's surge masking their path toward the city lights flickering through the downpour. Behind, shouts rose, a botched pursuit in the mud, but ahead loomed the penthouse's shadow, cameras, codes, and a brother's freedom. Yet as they crested a rise, Elena spotted it. A black sedan idling on a service road, unmarked, its driver watching the tunnel with idle patience. Not Russo's fleet plates, nor Chen's flashy rims. A third player. The flood had cracked more than dams. Alliances shifted like the current, and the real betrayal waited in the penthouse's glow. The city lights bled through the storm like smeared neon, turning Portland's skyline into a jagged crown of wet glass and steel. Elena and Alex hunkered in the tree line, rain sluicing off their jackets in cold sheets, the Columbia's roar fading behind them as they paralleled the service road. The black sedan idled like a predator at rest, its engine a low purr masked by the downpour, wipers sweeping rhythmically across the windshield. No plates visible in the gloom, just the subtle gleam of tinted windows and a driver who sat too still, watching the tunnel mouth, not the river. Elena's fingers tightened on the rifle strap, the wood slick under her palm, while Alex scanned with narrowed eyes, her breath fogging the air. "Not one of ours," Alex muttered, voice barely cutting the rain's hiss. Russo's rides are armored Escalades, too bulky for this road. Chen's favor imports, low profiles but flashy exhaust. This, freelance, maybe a fixer sniffing for the bounty Russo put out. Elena's mind churned the logistics. Bounties in the syndicate world weren't crude posters. They were whispers in backroom apps, encrypted drops to independents hungry for a cut. Her Spillway move had escalated it. Compound flooding meant lost millions in submerged vaults, manifests dissolving in the murk. Russo's code demanded retribution, swift and personal, but allies fractured under pressure. The sedan's driver lit a cigarette, the cherry glowing orange, illuminating a scarred profile that tugged at memory. Had he been at the docks, unloading her stolen crates? Human tells, the casual slouch hiding a holstered piece, radio earpiece glinting. Surveillance, but whose? "We skirt it," Elena decided, her voice edged with the push of independence against this forced partnership. Loyalty to her crew back home pulled her toward exposure, not deeper dives, but Alex's gaze held a mirror. Family caged, ethics bent by necessity. "City's 10 minutes by trail. Your penthouse plan, details, no more shadows." Alex nodded, leading them along a overgrown utility path, chain-link fences rattling in the wind. The air shifted from river brine to urban exhaust, diesel fumes mingling with the storm's petrichor as they neared the industrial fringe. Russo Tower, 40 stories, his crown jewel. Penthouse tops it, private elevator from the garage, retinal scan for access. Guards, 4 on rotation, 2 interior, sync-to-motion cams and keycard logs. Marco's in a guest suite, wired room, burner confiscation, but he smuggled a note last week. Floor safe code, 4729, his birthday backward. Elena absorbed it, the pieces fitting like a rusted lock tumbler. Realistic hurdles. No hacks without tools, no brute force without alarms tripping citywide alerts. Russo's empire ran on institutional limits. Cops on payroll turned blind eyes, but a botched entry meant feds circling manifests. The trail spat them out near a stormwater culvert, its grate half submerged, leading under the highway toward downtown. They crawled through, water knee-deep and churning with debris, the cold biting like accusations. Emerging on the other side, the tower loomed, a monolith of black marble and floodlit plazas, security lamps humming against the rain-slicked pavement. They ditched the rifle in a dumpster, too conspicuous for urban shadows, and slipped into the garage via a service door, Alex's port keycard buzzing them through with a green light. The space echoed with the low hum of generators and the drip of leaks from overhead pipes, air heavy with oil and concrete dust. Rows of luxury sedans gleamed under halogens, but Elena's eyes locked on the cameras. Subtle domes, angles covering blind spots with overlapping feeds. "Elevators that way," Alex whispered, pointing to a brass-plated door at the far end. "But we need a distraction. Fire alarm, maybe, or jam the garage exit." Before Elena could respond, tires screeched from the ramp, the black sedan, slipping in like oil. It parked casual, 2 doors opening to disgorge the driver and a partner, both in dark raincoats, hands dipping into pockets. Not charging, observing, earpieces crackling. Elena pulled Alex behind a support pillar, hearts pounding in sync. "Your tail," she hissed. "Who'd you tip?" Alex's face paled, but her denial was steel. "No one. If it's betrayal, it's from Marco's circle, Russo's squeezing confessions." The men moved methodically, one checking a tablet, likely pulling garage logs, plate readers flagging their truck from the boathouse. Tension coiled. Possessiveness in Alex's vendetta clashing with Elena's prudence, the alliance fraying under suspicion. But fear yielded to action. Elena spotted a maintenance cart nearby, stacked with solvent cans and rags. "Diversion," she said, grabbing a can, soaking a rag, and trailing it to the sedan's rear tire. She struck a lighter, flick, spark, and tossed it. Flames whooshed low, blue and hungry, licking up the undercarriage without engulfing the whole. Alarms blared, sprinklers hissing to life, drenching the garage in a metallic spray. The men spun, shouting into radios, "Fire in sublevel, evac protocol!" Chaos erupted, doors slamming, engines revving as valets scrambled. Elena and Alex bolted for the elevator, the private one unmarked, its panel requiring a code Alex punched. 2147, damn coordinates. A syndicate in joke. The doors slid shut just as footsteps pounded closer, the car ascending with a smooth whine. Elena's clothes clung cold, adrenaline sharp as the antiseptic tang of the penthouse air hit them. Polished oak and faint cigar smoke filtering in. The doors opened to a marble foyer, dimly lit. Guard silhouettes visible through frosted glass beyond. One paced, radio to ear. "Boss, floods contained but manifests are soup. Ledger backups secure. Chen's probing the docks, though." Alex froze, hand on Elena's arm. Partial discovery. The flood hadn't drowned everything. Backups meant Russo's code held. Never lose the books, even in deluge. But the Chen probe hinted at infiltration. Rivals turning the environment hazardous with staged diversions upstream. They crept forward, shadows hugging the walls, the floor cool underfoot. A side door to the service corridor. Unlocked. A human error in the rush. Inside, dim bulbs flickered over laundry carts and humming vents, leading to the guest suites. Marco's door loomed, keycard slot glowing red. Alex swiped her pilfered badge. Denied. Rotation changed, she breathed, panic edging her tone. Elena knelt, prying the panel with a shard of tile from the floor, exposing wires. No tech wizardry, just bridging a circuit. A trick from her mill days fixing generators. Sparks flew. The light flipped green. They slipped in. The room sparse. King bed, barred window overlooking the storm-lashed city. A man in his late 20s slumped in a chair, wrists zip-tied to the arms. "Marco?" Alex rushed forward, knife from her boot slicing the ties. He looked up, gaunt but alert, eyes widening. "Sis? How?" "Later," Elena cut in, scanning for bugs. Clock radio, lamp base, all clear. "Ledger, where's the master file?" He nodded to the floor safe, punching 4-729. It clicked open, revealing a slim drive and paper ledgers, edges curling from humidity. "Everything. Your shipments, Russo's Vancouver flips, Chen overlaps. But he's got a mole in the port. That's how he knew about the spillway. Betrayal confirmed, the air thickening with it." Elena pocketed the drive, but a door slam echoed from the hall. Guards returning, the fire false alarm. "Time's up," she said, rifleless but resolve steel. They barricaded the door with a dresser, Marco grabbing a letter opener as a makeshift blade. Shouts rose outside. "Intruders in the penthouse. Lock it down." The room's window overlooked a sheer drop, rain sheeting the glass, but a fire escape ladder glinted on the adjacent building, 30 feet across, wind-whipped. Elena smashed the pane, glass shattering like brittle trust, cold gusts howling in. "Rappel with bed sheets," she ordered, knotting linens while Alex and Marco covered the door. Gunshots splintered wood, bullets whining past, forcing them to the ledge. As they swung out into the storm, the city sprawling below like a web of lights and lies, Elena glanced back. Russo's silhouette filled the frame, face twisted in granite fury. The third player, the sedan driver, had radioed ahead, a turncoat's cut for the bounty. Victory's cost, Exposure. The ledger's a double-edged blade. But as they descended, ropes burning palms. The real question burned hotter. Who was the mole? And would the Chen's probe turn the river to blood before dawn? The storm lashed Portland's streets like a vengeful whip, rain sheeting off skyscrapers in silver veils that blurred the neon haze into a watery smear. Elena's palms burned as she gripped the knotted bedsheets, the makeshift rope swaying wildly against the penthouse's sheer flank, 40 stories of vertigo dropping away below. Wind howled through the gap, carrying the metallic tang of ozone and exhaust from the avenues far beneath, where taillights streaked like blood trails in the downpour. Marco descended last, his lighter frame slipping inches at a time, while Alex anchored the line from the ledge, her face pale but set, knife clutched in her free hand against any pursuing grasp. Bullets pinged off the building's facade, sparks flaring in the dark like fleeting betrayals. Russo's guards leaning from shattered windows, their shots wild in the gale. "Faster!" Elena shouted over the roar, her voice raw, muscles screaming as she hit the final drop to the adjacent rooftop. The fire escape clanged under her boots, slick with runoff, and she caught Marco as he tumbled down, his gasp lost in the thunder. Alex followed, landing with a skid that sent her sprawling into a puddle, the ledger's drive safe in her jacket, but her eyes wild with the cost. Exposure, now a syndicate-wide hunt. Her brother's freedom bought with a trail of chaos. They vaulted the gap to the next building's ledge, a service roof cluttered with humming AC units and satellite dishes, then scrambled down rusted ladders that groaned like informants cracking under pressure. The city sprawled below, a labyrinth of wet asphalt and sodium glow, alleys choked with overflowing gutters that rushed like miniature spillways. Elena's mind raced amid the adrenaline. The mole's shadow loomed larger than the flood, a human fracture in Russo's armor. The sedan's driver had tipped the scales, radio chatter feeding positions, turning their infiltration into a trap. Trust eroded like riverbanks. Alex's alliance felt like a debt, pulling Elena deeper into a world where autonomy was a luxury drowned in necessity. Hitting street level, they melted into the storm's cover, hoods up, darting through a service alley behind the tower. The air reeked of garbage and grilled meat from a nearby food cart, shuddered against the weather, its awning flapping like a distress signal. Sirens wailed in the distance, false alarms from the garage fire or real heat closing in. Marco leaned against a brick wall, catching his breath, his face gaunt under the drip of water from fire escapes overhead. "The drive's got everything," he panted, voice hoarse from disuse. But Russo's paranoid. Off-site backups, encrypted. I saw the access log once, IP from the Old Mill District, someone close. Elena's gut twisted, her territory, her people. Loyalty clashed with suspicion. Had one of her crew, desperate after the fire, flipped for a payout? The push-pull gnawed. Her code demanded protecting the independents, but betrayal poisoned the well. "We need a safe house," she said, scanning the alley's mouth where headlights sliced the rain. "Not yours. Too hot. There's an old warehouse by the Willamette, neutral ground. My father's spot, off the grid." Alex nodded, wiping rain from her eyes, the faint East Coast edge in her voice sharpened by fatigue. "Lead. But we check the drive first. Clues on the mole before they circle back." They moved in tight formation, weaving through back streets where puddles mirrored the flickering signs of all-night diners and pawn shops. The third player's sedan ghosted their periphery once, a black shape idling at a cross street, wipers thumping like a heartbeat. Elena's hand hovered near her boot knife. No rifle now, just grit, as they ducked into a stormwater grate, emerging on the riverfront fringe where the Willamette churned black and swollen, echoing the Columbia's fury. The warehouse squatted like a forgotten relic, its corrugated walls pitted by decades of damp Pacific winds, the air inside thick with the musty scent of sawdust and oiled machinery from Elena's logging days. They barred the door with a chain, the metal rattling in the gusts that rattled loose panes. Dim lantern light from a solar pack cast long shadows across crates stamped with faded mill insignia. ironic survivors of the fire. Marco slumped onto a workbench, plugging the drive into a battered laptop Elena kept hidden, its screen glowing blue in the gloom. Alex paced, pistol drawn, ears tuned to the distant hum of patrol boats on the water. "Fan out the files," Elena urged, leaning over Marco's shoulder. The ledger unfolded digitally. Columns of manifests, vehicle plates traced to ghost registrations, guard rotations time-stamped to her mill's quiet nights. Subtle tells emerged, a recurring entry for salvage hauls, coded initials, JV. Her father's old partner, Javier Ruiz, who'd vanished after the heart attack, presumed retired to Mexico. But the IP log pinned a login from a burner IP near the docks, time-stamped the night of the fire. Javier, Elena whispered, the name bitter on her tongue. He handled the water rights paperwork. If he sold the Spillway codes. Alex's face hardened, a mirror to Elena's turmoil. Mole confirmed. Internal. Greedy. Russo pays for silence, but Javier? He owed your dad. The revelation hung heavy. Human error's cruel edge, old grievances resurfacing, ambition trumping prudence. Elena's independence flared. Rally her crew, confront Javier solo. But the bond with Alex pulled, a found loyalty forged in flight, possessiveness in shared vengeance against the river's tyrants. A low rumble vibrated the floor. Not thunder, but engines, tires crunching gravel outside. Headlights pierced the grimy windows, sweeping like searchlights. Marco killed the screen, pocketing the drive. Chen convoy, scouts from the upstream locks. They must have tailed the tower breach. Shots cracked the night, splintering a side panel, the acrid bite of gunpowder mingling with rain-soaked wood. The environment turned hazardous. Storm blackout flickering the lantern, jammed exits from rusted chains, the river's swell threatening to breach the docks. Elena grabbed a crowbar from the bench, heart pounding as they barricaded deeper into the shadows. Alex covered the door, Marco rigging a tripwire with extension cords, crude but credible diversion. "We fight or flood 'em out," Elena said, spotting a manual pump for the warehouse's old sump. Tied to the river, a mini spillway of her own. But as the Chen men breached the outer fence, radios barking coordinates, a new voice cut through on a stolen frequency. The sedan's driver, bartering intel to the highest bidder. The mole's web tightened, alliances fracturing. Who'd Javier sold to next, and would the warehouse hold against the rising tide of rivals? If this tale already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more hidden stories to light. The warehouse's shadows twisted like coiling smoke as the Chen crew's engines growled closer, their beams slicing through the rain-lashed windows like accusatory fingers. Elena's grip tightened on the crowbar, its cold steel biting into her palm, while the sump pump's handle loomed nearby, a rusted lever tied to the Willamette's underbelly, capable of flooding the loading bay in minutes if cranked hard. The air hung heavy with the brine of swollen river water seeping under the doors and the sharp tang of gunpowder from the first probing shots, which splintered a support beam overhead, sending splinters raining down like brittle warnings. Marco crouched behind a stack of crates, his makeshift tripwire humming faintly with tension, extension cords daisy-chained to a jury-rigged battery that could spark a diversionary flash. Alex pressed against the wall, pistol raised, her eyes flicking between the door and Elena, a silent question in the dim lantern glow. Fight or flee? "They're probing, not storming," Alex whispered, her voice cutting the chaos like a knife through fog. Rain drummed the roof in relentless sheets, masking the crunch of boots on gravel outside. 3, maybe 4 men, radios crackling with clipped Mandarin accents filtered through static. Chens don't waste ammo on ghosts. They want the ledger. Russo's weakness is their gain. Elena nodded, mind racing through the logistics. The upstream locks gave the Chens control over flow rates, but her spillway surge had jammed their own pumps, turning the river into a shared hazard. Rivals circling like sharks scenting blood, But the third player's sedan idled unseen in the periphery, its driver a wild card bartering scraps of intel for a cut. Elena's code surged. Protect the independents. Never let the river claim innocence. But Javier's betrayal soured it, old loyalties fracturing like the warehouse's warped planks. Her father's partner, who'd shared meals and mapped water rights under lantern light, now a ghost in the IP logs, selling spillway codes for syndicate scraps. Ambition versus prudence. The push-pull clawed at her, independence demanding she expose him alone. Yet Alex's alliance anchored her. A found family forged in the storm's fury. Pump first, Elena decided, low and urgent. Draw 'em in, then bolt for the docks. Marco, light the wire on my signal. He assented with a grim nod, fingers trembling on the battery switch, his face etched with the weight of his captivity. Vows kept under pressure, a past loss in Russo's cages shaping his quiet resolve. The door rattled, hinges groaning as a shoulder tested it, the chain holding but straining with a metallic whine. Shots punched through the wood, low and deliberate, forcing them to scatter. Elena darted to the sump, wrenching the lever with a grunt that echoed off the rafters. Water gushed in response, a cold torrent bubbling up from the floor grates, carrying the muddy reek of the Willamette's depths, sediment, fish scales, and the faint diesel slick from upstream barges. The loading bay flooded ankle-deep in seconds, the level rising with deceptive speed, turning the concrete into a treacherous mirror reflecting the lantern's flicker. Outside, shouts rose in confusion, boots splashing as the Chens pushed the door, the chain snapping with a sharp twang. 2 men burst in first, raincoats dripping, compact SMGs sweeping the gloom, Port Authority cast-offs, modified for close quarters. Ledger, hand it over. One barked, his accent thick, eyes locking on Marco's crates. Alex fired twice, precise pops that winged the leader's shoulder, sending him sprawling into the rising water with a curse. The second dove behind a forklift, radioing backup. Intruders confirmed. Vasquez and the driver. Secure the drive. Elena swung the crowbar, connecting with a third intruder's knee as he rounded the corner, the crack of bone muffled by the pump's roar. He crumpled, clutching his leg, but his partner returned fire, bullets ricocheting off machinery with sparks that lit the air like fireflies in a blackout. Marco triggered the wire then, a brilliant flash erupting from the cords, crude EMP from overloaded capacitors, frying the Chen's radios in a burst of static and smoke. The warehouse plunged into deeper shadow, the lantern sputtering as water shorted its base, leaving only the storm's gray light filtering through bullet-holed panes. "Go!" Elena yelled, grabbing Alex's arm, the 3 of them splashing toward a side exit, a rusted roll-up door half-jammed from years of neglect. The flood climbed to their calves, cold and insistent, tugging at their boots like the river's own grasp. But as they heaved the door, gears grinding in protest, a new engine throbbed outside, not Chen's vans, but the sedan's low purr, headlights pinning them in place. The driver stepped out, hooded against the rain, a silenced pistol glinting in his hand. Scarred profile confirmed, dockside familiar, Javier's shadow in the flesh. "JV sends regards," he said, voice gravel over the downpour, circling with deliberate steps. Spillway codes bought a nice retirement. Ledger's mine now. Russo's out. Chen's pay double. Partial discovery hit like the water's chill. Javier hadn't just sold to Russo. He'd played all sides, feeding the third player scraps to ignite the war. Human error amplified. Greed's blind spots. Behavioral tells in pilfered manifests and late-night logins. Elena's rifle was gone, but the crowbar felt like legacy in her fist, her father's code echoing. Never harm innocents, but settle debts with the current's force. Alex lunged, pistol barking, but the driver sidestepped, returning fire that grazed her sleeve, tearing fabric with a hiss. Marco charged, letter opener flashing, tackling him into the mud. The struggle a tangle of grunts and splashes, the pistol skittering into the flood. Elena waded in, crowbar raised, but Chen reinforcements crested the fence, More shots cracking the night, one clipping the sedan's tire with an explosive pop. Chaos reigned, a botched escort turning gauntlet, distant watchers on the docks signaling with flashes. Russo's cleanup. The environment betrayed them, water surging higher, jamming the door halfway, storm winds howling through the gap like a jammed exit. They broke free in the melee, dragging Marco from the fray, the driver subdued but alive, zip-tied with his own belt, left for the Chen's mercy. Racing into the alleys, the warehouse receding behind a curtain of rain and gunfire, Elena clutched the drive, its weight a promise and a curse. Javier's web spanned the river, but the ledgers held his threads, expose him, and the syndicates crumbled. Yet as patrol lights flickered in the distance, sirens cutting the gale, the real revelation loomed. Russo's compound flood had been contained, but the true deluge was personal, loyalties drowning in betrayal. Who had the driver radioed last? And would the dock's blackouts hide their escape, or summon the final flood? The alleys twisted like veins through Portland's underbelly, rain turning the pavement into a treacherous slick of oil and grit that splashed under Elena's boots with every frantic step. The warehouse's gunfire faded into the storm's howl, but the echo lingered, a staccato reminder of the fragile line they'd crossed. Her lungs burned from the sprint, the crowbar still clutched in one hand like a talisman, while the other gripped the ledger drive in her jacket pocket, its edges digging into her ribs. Marco limped beside her, a shallow graze on his calf, seeping red into the floodwaters pooling at the curbs, and Alex brought up the rear, pistol drawn, her sharp breaths syncing with the distant wail of sirens weaving through the blackout zones. The Willamette's briny reek mingled with the acrid bite of wet asphalt and distant exhaust, the river's swell lapping at the embankment, like an impatient tide waiting to claim its due. "Who'd he radio?" Elena gasped, dodging a chain-link fence that rattled in the wind, its links rattling like loose change in a syndicate safe. The sedan's driver, Javier's errand boy, had been left bound in the mud, but his earpiece had crackled one last transmission before Marco's tackle. Coordinates for the docks, a handover point. Betrayal's logistics were brutally simple. Burner apps pinging encrypted servers, pulling in whoever bid highest in the chaos Elena's Spillway had unleashed. "Doesn't matter," Alex shot back, voice edged with steel over the gale. "Docks are the nexus. Russo's barges regrouping, Chen's locking the channels. If the drive hits the water, it's game over." Marco nodded grimly, his face slick with rain and pain, the weight of his escape pressing like the storm clouds overhead. Family bonds tested in the firelight of safe houses, and now this deluge. His past losses, months in that penthouse cage, had forged a quiet code, vows to never let the river swallow another. They burst onto the waterfront esplanade, the docks stretching like skeletal fingers into the churning black water, sodium lamps flickering erratically in the blackout, power surges from the flood-tripping grids upstream. Crates loomed in stacks, sodden and shifting, the air thick with the diesel hum of idling engines and the metallic tang of rusting chains slapping against hulls. Patrol boats cut wakes in the distance, their spotlights sweeping like accusatory eyes. But the real watchers were human. Shadows moving between warehouses, radios whispering coordinates. Elena spotted the sedan first, abandoned at the pier's edge, doors ajar, the driver's zip ties severed by a blade. Javier himself waited there, a wiry figure in a hooded coat, flanked by two Chen enforcers whose compact builds screamed upstream muscle. No Russo men yet. The boss's code held him back, orchestrating from afar, but his compound's submersion had cracked that restraint. Lost vaults meant personal debts. "You should have stayed buried with your old man," Javier called, his voice carrying over the wind, laced with the faint tremor of a man who'd gambled too long on the current. He held a tablet, its screen glowing with pilfered manifests, her mill's insignia mocking from the data. "Spillway was clever, Elena. Bought you a night. But the ledgers? I own those threads now. Chen's pay clean. Russo's too hot after the flood." Elena's blood boiled, the push-pull ripping through her. Autonomy screaming to charge, expose the mole who'd bled her family dry, but prudence anchoring her in the shadows. Javier's tells were plain now. Nervous fidget with the tablet, eyes darting to the boats. Greed's human error, overreaching in the storm. "You sold us out for scraps," she shouted back, stepping into the light, crowbar raised like her father's rifle. "Water rights, crates, codes. Dad trusted you. The river doesn't forgive thieves." Marco tensed beside her, letter opener palmed, while Alex circled wide, using a stack of pallets for cover. Shots cracked from the Chen men, low-caliber pops muffled by suppressors, bullets whining off metal drums and sending sparks dancing in the rain. Elena dove behind a forklift, the machine's cab offering scant shield, its hydraulics hissing like a cornered snake. The environment turned lethal, blackout plunging sections into inky voids, storm winds whipping loose tarps that flapped like diversions, the Willamette surging against the pilings with a groan that threatened to buckle the pier. A botched patrol boat horn blared nearby, Russo's influence stalling official response, institutional limits buying time for the cleanup. Alex fired from the flank, her shot clipping a Chen's arm, drawing a yelp that echoed off the water. "Drive's the key. Upload it now," she yelled, tossing Marco her phone. He crouched, fingers flying over the screen, syncing the ledger to a secure cloud drop, anonymous tip line for a DA untouched by payrolls, manifests unraveling the web. Javier's logins, Russo's thefts, Chen overlaps in falsified shipping. But Javier lunged, tablet raised like a shield, his knife flashing as he closed on Elena. She swung the crowbar, connecting with his wrist in a sickening crunch, the device skittering into the flood with a splash. He howled, staggering back, but the second Chen tackled her, the impact slamming her into the pier's edge, breath exploding from her lungs. Pain flared in her side, a rib cracked perhaps from the fall. But Marco's diversion sparked. He triggered a dockside flare from a nearby crate, red light blooming like a signal fire, blinding the attackers. Alex hauled Elena up, the three bolting toward a waiting skiff at the end of the pier. Neutral runner, hailed by Marco's earlier whisper on a dockside burner. Bullets chased them, one grazing Marco's shoulder, drawing blood that mixed with the rain, victory's cost etched in red. Javier's scream cut short as the pier buckled under the surge, water claiming him in a frothy pull. No dramatic end. Just the river's indifferent logistics swallowing a turncoat. They gunned the skiff's motor, cutting into the black waves, the city lights receding like fading accusations. Sirens converged on the docks now, feds alerted by the upload, clues in plates, codes, behavioral logs toppling the syndicates in audits and raids. Russo's empire would fracture, the flood's true deluge washing clean the ledger's sins. But as the boat rocked through whitecaps, Elena leaned against Alex. Marco bandaged roughly with a torn sleeve, the pain a badge of bonds reforged. The threat had been real, organized in greed's shadows, but triumph came scarred. Injuries, exposure of old ghosts, sacrifices in trust. Yet the treasure gleamed brighter. Protection in each other's watch, a code of loyalty outlasting power's grasp, found family rising from the depths, like the river after storm. In the quiet wake, the adventure's echo lingered, not in spoils or status, but in memories etched deep, vows kept, betrayals purged, a legacy transformed by the current's unyielding flow. The river had taken much, but given back a horizon unbound. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of loyalty, danger, and found family. See you in the next story.